gets up on the back and lay, by the way. Oh, sorry.
No, I see. You go ahead, I'll be right here.
Well, good morning. It's good to see everybody today. Happy Father's Day to those fathers that are here, and to those, if you're watching online, happy Father's Day to you also. We'll be starting class in just a moment, but we'll sing number 114, the first and fifth verses of this song, I Stand Amazed, and then we will go to our classes. I stand amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene, and wonder how he could love me, a sinner condemned and clean. Oh, marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall
Good morning, everyone. Morning. Good to have everybody with us this morning. I figured we'd have quite a few gone. I know some are out and about vacation or summertime. Everybody sees that. So warm, been warm already. Woo. Everyone's like, yeah, I agree. Yep. Yeah, I went out Friday and mowed out our farm, mowed out there most of the day, then went back out Saturday morning, finished mowing, and hooked the brush hog on the tractor and started brush hogging. I lasted about 3.5, 4 hours maybe. I was like, I'm done. Had to come back home, cut the day about 3 hours early than I was planned on. But it got hot and just really remarkable when you look at that and you think about it. But there is, as we know and understand, we continue in our area, of course, making plans. I will say this, I think I got all the fathers, I'll say Happy Father's Day to those who are here right now. And of course, we'll announce again for those for worship service when we get into there. But coming to James. James, as we know here, as we've been stating, is talking about continuing this area of making plans and the importance behind it, and discusses the subject. We talked about this a little bit last week, knowing that, plans, we usually start by thinking about things that are there, and then we create them, and we have different ideas we see on this board up here. You have big ideas, small ideas, maybe all different thoughts, different concepts of it. And then, of course, you have that vision, what you're visioning it to be. Exactly what for it to be like. And, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't turn out that way. It just depends really where we're at it. There's good, there's bad plans, and we also understand there's a yes and a no when it comes to different plans. Yes, we'll do this. No, we can't really do that. But it all comes down to doing the things that we would find in the world we live in today. But as Christians, we need to understand that we, of course, need to be thinking about it in the plans of asking God about it, knowing what God's plans are. And as we look to this way, and we'll continue with this, talking about His will and knowing that we're looking in that right direction for it. James 4, we'll go ahead and read these verses again. It's 2 slides, James 4, 13 through 17, to remind us of where we're at. If someone go ahead and read that for us, please.
Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit. Whereas we do not know what will happen tomorrow, or what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord's will, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to him that knows to do good and does not do it, it is a sin.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. So as we look at this, and I will say something on verse 16. James, as it says, but now you boast in your arrogance. That really is, the way the Greek is, it'd be like kind of, but now if you boast. He's talking about, if you do this, if this is how you decide in your own will, your own way, that type of boasting is evil. And we'll talk about it as we go through that, understanding, that we, plans, we make them all the time. We're subject, it's very relevant today. We talked about, last week we mentioned them, we all make plans for, people make plans for after school, after high school, for college maybe, or just a job, looking at that and the importance with it, tech school, there's all different things out there. We know people plan for marriages, and of course plans for families. There's plans for retirement. Right now during the summertime, people make plans for vacation. Some people make plans a year in advance for their vacation. And we don't know for sure, we're going to be a part of that or not, if we're going to make it to that day, if God will allow us, or the ways in this world and everything we see. But without a doubt, we do that. And so we're all used to making plans. And when we do that, we need to be looking at it towards God's way. And we've discussed that just a little bit, kind of with this next area, is that, what is God's will for me? First of all, we need to realize that we need to seek first to discern God's will and plan accordingly to what is there. To a great degree, we know this is possible we looked at last week 3 verses. We're not going to go back and look at them again. But we know that we see Paul talking about that we are to understand, first of all, the will of God. Ephesians 5:17, we are to be filled with His will, Colossians 1:9, and we are to prove His will. We know Romans chapter 12, verse 2. And as we look at that, we understand these things, that the only way that we're going to understand God's will, of course, is going to His Word that is found in it. And, of course, this is very, relative, especially as we see it is revealed in His Word. I'm not going to know the will of God. You're not going to know the will of God. Nobody's going to know the will of God unless they read His Word. People get to say, well, I think God wants me to do this, or I think God wants me to do that. Thinking's not enough. We have to understand, and we have to really acknowledge. And this is the great thing about God, is that He has made that available to us through His Word, and knowing without a doubt that we can know 100%. Remember, God's will, the Word talks about pertaining to things that are right, things that may be wrong, that we want to be careful with when it comes to planning, or the things that are found in the pages of the Bible. And when we know God's will, I guess you'd say, when God's revealed His will from our study, then we can act really and plan accordingly, we would say in a Christian way. Plan accordingly to as God would have it. Because there are a lot of things out there that we may plan that God doesn't want us to be a part of. There may be things out there that God's like, hey, maybe you need to turn to me to help you with that decision and everything that's going along with it. So as we see, there's a right way to plan to show really our submission to God and leaving our plans subject to His will. And this is where we left off last week. We left off talking about God's permissive will. Now, this permissive will, what we mean by that is that God has already given us permission to do it. And this does not pertain, we have things that pertain to matters of right or wrong, but that's not what this is about here. Because God's already approved it. He's already given us permission for it. So here we would say, as we said last week, that this would be, things that are good and things that can actually even make our plans better, because we've looked to the goodness of God and that is found within. As we understand that God has given us permission to do, when we make plans around this permissive will, things are going to be so much better. Number one, we're going to be thinking in our mind, God is good with this. This is what, He's fine with this and wants me to be a part of this without a problem. And so it's easier to plan in that way, in that sense. So even knowing that God allows, I guess you're saying, knowing, what is good and better, we still need to show our dependence on Him. We need to show our dependence on God in such matters by committing our plans to His will, which brings us to this next point that we didn't look at next week, and that is this, is where we stop. That, think about, has God given us free choice to ignore His will? I mean, not that He wants to, but has He given us free choice? He's given us our own choice, our own. We can decide whether to follow His will or ignore it. But here's what happens. If we are ignoring it, we need to stop right now. We don't want to ignore that will. We don't want to ignore that it's found in His Word. We want to look to those things and let them guide us in our way. If someone decides, well, I'm just going to ignore the will of God, I'm not even going to ask Him when I make my own plans, I'm going to do my own things. Really, when it comes down to that, that is a way of foolishness. To plan this way is very foolish, as the Bible shows us. And we'll see again in those verses that we mentioned a moment ago, as we'll go through each one of these in just a second. The first one you would say is verse 13, is that life is complex. Does anybody disagree with that? Is life complex? I mean, it really is. Life is complex in many ways, and we're, especially today, we see the way things are going in society and so on. It just seems like they're becoming more complex. Life truly does. I think about this little picture here behind me, that life equals reality. When people, I always, it's like, wait a minute, now I need to really, realize that life is real. And I got to figure it out. And, a lot of that times, we graduate from high school and maybe we go to college or going to a job. And, we start working that, and the next thing you know, you're at mom and dad's house and they have to do what? Who's taking care of them now? Themselves, and it's like reality hits in. It's like, bam. I remember even before I moved out of the house, I bought a vehicle and I bought my own truck while I was still a junior in high school. Brought it home. My mom was like, where'd you get this? Whose is this? I said, it's mine. She goes, no, it's not. I said, yeah, I bought it. I was already working a 40-hour-week job while I was going to high school. And while I was in high school, and she said, you could have got that on your own. I did. Got my own loan and everything. And we see that. Then I had to, I was paying my own insurance, own gas. And the more I enjoyed working, and I didn't really much enjoy school, but I was doing it. And, enjoyed that working there. But as things continued, when I got to the point where I moved out and I got married, and I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. Now things are real. I mean, this is really reality. I don't have mom and dad anymore to go, spend the night to sleep I stay at. They're taking care of food and all that and everything. I do all on my own. Life becomes complex. But it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It could be a normal, everyday thing, but even better with God in our life. And so as we see this, there is complexity. In fact, verse 13, let's go ahead and read this, and we're going to read this again for us, what it says.
Now you who say today or tomorrow we'll go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit.
See, in this verse, we see complexity. Because does everybody agree there's complexity of time? Think about the complexity of time. Today, tomorrow, when. Sometimes we feel like there's not enough time. Does everyone agree with that? I mean, in a day, we look at it, we're like, where'd the day go? Right now, during the summertime, it seems like there's a lot more time because, we see the sun comes up, say about 6:25 or 6:30 right now, and it's really setting, usually by 8:30, 45, but it's still light after 9 o'clock. I mean, and does that make your day seem really, really long? It does. I know I've worked out doing some of that outside at the farm or something, come home and and we'll eat supper, and I'll be like, okay, I'm ready to go to bed. And it's daylight. I'm like, it's already 8 o'clock, and it's still daylight out there. I'm like, I can't go to bed yet. This is crazy. And we see that. But then when winter hits around, what happens with the day? Seems really short, doesn't it? I mean, really short. You still want to get things done. You're like, okay, I'll take care of that tomorrow. And it's with that. Well, that's complexity, and that's what we see with life. But we need to think about it the same way as we think about time. Today, tomorrow, when. How many of us are promised, the next 5 minutes? We don't. How many of us are promised tomorrow? And that's a complexity. But when we look to God, and His will, we're making plans. When we look at that, we need to realize that, we don't have to be concerned about tomorrow. What I mean by this, we don't have to worry about it at all. We shouldn't be. There shouldn't be anxiety for it, because we don't even know if it's going to be there. And if we turn it over to God, there's knowing God's will, that God has promised me only right now, in this moment I'm in. And if we live for that moment, those complexities get easier to deal with. Well, there's also complexity with activities. Notice up there what we see, where it tells us, it says, today, tomorrow, we will go to such city, spend the year there, and buy and sell and make a profit. This is activities. So many decisions today to make, and so many mistakes might be made. I mean, how many of us here look back at our past and have made like probably 1,000 mistakes or more? I mean, how many? I know I have 1,000 mistakes. I mean, it just, but each one of those mistakes, here it is, with understanding this area of making plans. When I make my plans, I work, those mistakes that I made, you learn from them, right? And you learn from them, maybe you go, if I'd have done this with God in mind a little more, maybe it would have worked out better. And so we start to think about it that way. It's complex to think about that, but when it comes to God, God's Word is not complex. It's not. It's not difficult to understand. I mean, there are some passages, of course, we're like, what in the world? I mean, we understand that, but the majority of it isn't. And it's very simplistic. And when we have God in our life like that, life doesn't seem so complex. And that's what we want. That would be a foolish way to go through life, just living like that all the time. So it is possible to know God's will in any manner that would increase the likelihood that our decisions and plans would come out correct. Not just in the way of God, but actually in the way we fit and everything about it. So that's the first foolish thought when we think about it. The next one would be here, is that we understand without a doubt to plan in a foolish way would be very foolish, as we see here in a minute, about not taking the will of God in the context of who we are and what we're doing, because life is uncertain. How many here agree with that? I mean, life is completely uncertain. We just spoke a moment ago about time. How many of you all know for sure you're going to come home tomorrow from wherever you go? I mean, if you go somewhere, well, first of all, I don't even know about tomorrow. I mean, how many of us today, you're either probably going to go out to eat, or you're going to go home and eat, celebrate Father's Day, or just, or just enjoy the day as we would see and understand, and everything with it. But we don't know for sure. It's uncertain. I know Melissa, she's making her dad, she asked me about it first, her dad's favorite meal, he's always said, and some of y'all may go, really? His favorite meal is meatloaf. That's his favorite meal. And, and Melissa, she goes, I think I'm going to make meatloaf on Sunday. And she goes, it's not my favorite meal. It's not my worst meal either. I mean, I enjoy it to a point. And I told her, I said, that's fine. That sounds good. But she set her oven. She's got another, she set the oven to come on by itself for us. Now, she's relying on that oven to come on. But do we know without a doubt for sure 100% it'll come on and start? No. I mean, it can be uncertain. And that's the way life is. Verse 14. Look at the first part of it. Someone go and read that again for us. That very first part of 14 that's in yellow.
Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow.
There's where we see the uncertainty. No one has a guarantee, we said, tomorrow, whether they will even be here, or even what will happen. Now, here's what's important. Who does know about tomorrow? God. So there it goes back to this thought. If we are making plans by the will of God, does that help us for tomorrow probably? It does. If tomorrow gets here, it will help us with tomorrow. Because God can bring about what He wills for the future without fail. It's not uncertainty with God. It's not a chance. It's everything without fail. God takes care of it. And we see that. And we won't know anything about that unless we're reading about His will. So for someone to make their plans without the will of God, that's very foolish in a sense. So since this is true, we should certainly desire to make plans that are keeping with the plans of God. Which brings us number 3. Here's another thought. To plan this way would be foolish because of this right here. Life is fragile. Do we all agree with that? Life is very fragile. It doesn't take much to hurt our body, does it? I mean, it really doesn't take a whole lot. Children are amazing sometimes. I mean, I think God made their bones almost like rubber for a little bit. I mean, the way they fall and do things and flip over and do everything, and they're fine. But as an adult, as we get up, we fall over, we might end up doing what? Those bones aren't rubber, are they? I mean, not at all. And we see men break a bone, they cut ourselves, whatever it may be. And how many years, you know, as the older you get, you just bump something and you bruise. How many of you ever, yeah, I mean, that happens. And we see that, or you cut yourself and you're working, you don't even know you're cut. You know, you don't even realize it. You know, you just go on about your business, and we see that. See, that's what we understand about this life. It's not just these bodies, but all of life is fragile, without a doubt. And without having God in those thoughts, making those plans and that will, why wouldn't we want to have Him in our plans? Then take care of that fragileness that may be there. Which brings us to this verse here. Someone go ahead and read that very little part, second part of 14.
What is your life? It is even a vapor.
For what is your life? That's right. It is even a vapor. So think about these verses. It talks about being like a vapor. Paul did write Psalm. David, when David's talking here in Psalm 39. Someone go ahead and read this for us, please.
Indeed, you have made my days as handbreadth, and my ages as nothing before you. Certainly every man in his best state is but vapor. Surely every man walks about like a shadow. Surely they busy themselves in vain. He heaps up riches and does not know who will gather them.
Thank you. Notice how David says, how he writes about this. It says, and my age is nothing before you. But here he says, certainly every man, every human being is what he's talking about here, at their best state. So being at the best part and time of your entire life of where you are is still but what? But a vapor. I mean, everybody understands what a vapor is. Well, before we say anything about it, let's read this next verse too. So we'll go ahead and read 39 verse 11.
When will rebuke you, correct man for iniquity, and make beauty melt away like moth. Surely every man is a vapor.
Every man, every person is a vapor. You know, how substantial is a vapor or a shadow? You know, think about that for a moment. Just think about that as it sets in. You know, as a child, have you ever seen a child the first time they see their shadow? What do most of them try to do with it?
Get away from it.
They get away from it. They're like, what is that thing? And it's not just there. It's touching me. It's connecting me. You're getting away from the thing as fast as they can. And next thing you know, they run into shade. And where's the shadow go? It's gone. They're like, whoo, I beat it. I outran that thing, you know. And then they walk back out of the sun. There it is again. You know, I mean, they're like that. But, you know, it'll disappear. You know, clouds come over the sun. It's gone. And we see it. I think, you know, Peter Brand talked about trying to sew it on. You know, we see those things and understand that how a shadow is. Vapor is the same way. Smoke, whatever it may be. You know, when smoke's outside, you know, and you see it, and then you come back outside 5 minutes later, that smoke could be what? Gone. Like it was never even there. A vapor is what we see. So how quickly, you know, in this life when it comes to fragileness, we could succumb, you know, to sickness or an accident, really illustrates how frail we really are. And so the will of God, you think the will of God can help us from being so fragile? Because we learn to do things that would help us, that would better us, that would keep us possibly from some of those things happening. Some things in our life when it comes to sickness or accidents and so on are brought on by ourselves. There's others that aren't at all. They just happen because of this human body of what it is. And so, you know, it would be foolish then to think, I have the strength. I have the strength within myself to make my plans happen. I can do it all alone. I don't need you, God. I'm good to go. It's not a good way to think about it. Not a good way at all. And, you know, I've made plans in the past where we've kind of jumped the gun, you know, ahead of time, you know, and without God in our thought, and it just didn't turn out well at all. And then, you know, I have plans, what we want to do, and we do it by the will of God, and it makes us decide, no, we're not going to go do that. Not that it was a sin or anything, but no, that's just not going to work, because it hasn't aligned with the prayers that we had and what God's will is and everything in it. We always want to have that there. That's why we remember a verse like this in James, at the beginning of James chapter 1, verses 10 through 11, where he says these words. Someone go ahead and read that for us, please.
But the rich in his humiliation, because as a flower of the field he will pass away. For no sooner has the Son of beautiful appearance perishes. So the rich man also will fade away in his pursuits.
Thank you. You know, I think about this, you know, it's amazing. When we first bought the property out there west of town, when the spring came, we had flowers come up that were just gorgeous, you know, just planted years ago, I'm sure. And they were just beautiful, you know, and I was like, I didn't take a picture of them. I was like, oh, I'll take a picture of them the next day when I come out there. I got out there the next day, and guess what happened with flowers? They're all gone. I was like, wait a minute, there's no way they just fell off. And then I start walking around, and guess what I see? Kind of tracks all over flowers, deer. You know, the deer love flowers. And it's kind of the same thought, you know, you see the beauty there in it, next thing you know, it's gone. It vanishes. And we see that happening, you know, and we need to think about that, of course, when it comes to our lives, when it comes to, you know, how we're living, our fragileness of our bodies and everything with it. You know, it's there, the beauty's there and everything with it, and it kind of disappears. It's like the older we get, you know, we may think, wow, you see a picture of us when we were in our 20s, 30s going, yep, wish I looked like that. Some say, I wish I could go back to that. I'm like, not me, no way. I don't want to go back to those years. Just let me keep going where I'm at now. I've learned a lot. And, you know, I'm enjoying my life. And that's what we see with it. But that's how things happen. That's what, and to plan that way, once again, would be foolish. Which brings us to this next thought. To plan without the will of God, God tells us another way, that's foolish because life is short. You know, life is short. And we all agree, you know, when you're a 20-year-old and you open your shirt, you probably have like a Superman thing, yeah, Superwoman, you know, I'm feeling great, you know, nothing can bother me, nothing can knock me down, you know, and you see all that. But as we get older, time seems to do what? How does it move? Does it move slower? It seems like it moves faster, doesn't it? It's like, where'd that 24 hours go? Where'd that week go? Where'd that month go? And it happens, and it allows us to observe and to see that life is short. So if life is this short, why would we plan without God? Why would we make those kind of ideas or those kind of thoughts, you know, in our life? I've said it before, you know, to imagine I have a rope going all the way around this auditorium, you know, long, big white rope, and the whole thing is white, and just like you can tell where it's at. And at the very end, on this side that I'm holding, you see a red piece of tape over it. And on that red piece of tape, here's what it is. You see this long, huge rope. Guess what that red piece of tape represents? I've said it before, our life. What is all the other? That's eternity. You know, people all the time, they say, you know, you're crazy doing what you do in this life for God, for Christ. You know, you only got so much time. Enjoy it for yourself. And you say, look at this. Here is life. It's not that over there, that eternity, that's not crazy. This part's crazy. If we put everything into this life for ourselves and not God and nothing with Christ, that's crazy. It's that much. And we think about that and see that. That's how short life is. In fact, James tells us once again in this verse. So we're going to read that verse for us, please. Actually, read the yellow. It is go ahead, continue.
It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away.
Just for a little time. And then vanished away, appears for a little time. You know, Job's a great example of that. Job talks about this in the, you know, basically the oldest book in the Bible is what we see more than likely. And let's see what he says, verse 25. Someone go and read that for us, please.
Now my days are swifter than a runner. They flee away, they see no good. They pass by like swift ships, like an eagle swooping on its prey.
Thank you. You know, we understand a swim, you know, running really fast, you know, and leaving everything behind. And, you know, they flee away. How many of you have ever seen an eagle go up in the air, you know, looking for something, and then they're sitting in one spot, and then what will they do with their wings? They kind of do like this, right? They go, whoop, they come up and they just drop. And they drop really fast, or they're flying really fast. I think of a falcon. You know, they say a falcon goes up in the air when it comes down. It's doing over 100 miles an hour as it's coming down, and it's able to come down and boom. And you see it, and that's what he's saying. It's like an eagle, falcon, swooping on its prey. They are not what? What is that prey down there? Do they see the eagle coming? They see that falcon? Not at all. They don't see it. They're not expecting it at all. And he's saying that's how it is. That's how we see things. The same thing. It appears for a little while, a little time, but then it goes away. Since life is so short, why would we not want to do things by the will of God? Why would we not want to experience that of Him? See, that's what we see with us, which brings us to this thought here, 1 John 2. 1 John 2:17. Someone go and read that for us, please.
And the world is passing away, and the lust of it, but he who does the will of God abides forever.
Thank you. Shortness. That's how short it is. You know, I told Melissa the other day, it blows my mind to think next month we've been here 3 years. 3 years. I mean, it just went by like that. It don't feel, you know, sometimes you look at it like, oh, that day was long, but it really does. It just flies by. And it's amazing when we think about things like that, and that's what we see. So that's where he's getting at, this area, the foolishness that's found in it. And so we need to never want to fall into that foolish area in that sense, which brings us to this thought. See, brethren, here we understand verse 16, to plan this way would be basically, is a boastful arrogance. You know, we have to ask ourselves, are we arrogant? You know, I can guarantee you, I know people in this life that are arrogant, without a doubt. And we got to ask ourselves, are we? And, you know, when we get into that category of arrogance, meaning we do things at our will, our way, in the way we want it. In fact, 16 tells us, I mean, he's just very clear about it. So I'm going to read that first part of it, the second part there, please.
But now you boast in your arrogance.
Thank you. But now you boast. When we look at the Greek, like I said, but now if you boast in your arrogance, also his boasting is evil. So we see this of what is found with to plan without making any consideration of God's will. Once again, it's basically to say this: God, I'm higher than you are. I'm better than you. I'm more important than you. Brother, think about God. God says, I am the creator, sustainer of everything. He said, there is nothing higher than me whatsoever. But even though God being better, being higher, being just beyond all of us, I mean, he's, has all that area of understanding, that knowing everything every day, what's going to happen and everything with it, he still takes time to be concerned with you and me. How many people do you know in this life that are way up high, say in a company, the highest spot in the company, wherever it may be, and they will, they take care of everybody else. They'll stop everything to do everything for everybody. Is that the normal? What do we see that person usually doing? Just taking care of themselves, making sure they come first. They come first. So, how could anyone be that arrogant when it comes to God? People may say, well, I'm not arrogant to God. I don't do that. Well, let's say this. Even if we don't say it, if we put God second in our life, if we don't have him at first always, we're saying that. We're basically saying it. I'm arrogant. We are stating that in a sense with what is there. So as we look to that, to plan that way, James is summing this up, kind of bringing it to an end. He tells us here that it's sin. He said it's sin. And brethren, all of us, if we don't know this of God, we're not going to know what's a sin and what's not. I mean, that's why it's so important to realize that. In fact, let's finish the whole thing out, 16 and 17. Someone go and read 16 again and all of 17, please.
But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Think
about that. Therefore, to him to know who knows to do good and does not do it. We look at this. I read this verse one time to it was a teenager I was reading to. He wasn't raised in church. Visited a couple times in the congregation we're at. And we read this verse and I said, see this? And he goes, well, I guess it's good for me not to know about God then, or know everything about it. I was like, what? I mean, and you look at that verse again and you go, okay, I see where you're going with this, If I don't, know to do good and I don't do, I just won't know what it is. But we can't live like that. Does God say, okay, if you live like that, you're fine. You're okay. I'll let you into heaven. Is that what he says? Not at all. God says, I've made heaven for you, this place for you. It's amazing. Jesus talked about it to the apostles and how wonderful it would be. But to do that, to get into heaven, just like anything else, we have to know what the will of God is. We have to be willing to do it. And not boast in arrogance who we are, but say how great God is and everything with it, as we would see that. Brother Clifford.
This verse right here to me is, you think about it, just like you said about the young man, it should put chills in all of our spines, when we read this verse. We should never let the sun go down at night without, confessing our sins to God, because this talks about sins of omission as well as
exactly. That's right. I mean, it's exactly right. And, you know, I mean, we may, you know, in the Old Testament, they used to have different sacrifices for different things. And one of them was for that, you know, that they didn't even know they sinned. And they took it to a point that was way too far. They, you know, the Jews said, well, say like, for instance, you stepped on a bug and you killed it. Well, you better ask for God for, you know, to forgive you for things you don't even know about. You know, that's beyond, as we see it. But are there times in our life we may sin and not know it? Could that happen? You know, we could offend somebody, right? And not even, they didn't say anything about it, so we don't know what. We don't know we offended them. But here it is. If we know the will of God, we know how to talk, we would hopefully not be one that would offend somebody. You know, we would be doing what's right. And in that sense, and so here with that, even with that student that I was saying, well, I'm not going to know what to do. I'm not going to know it, so I'm not going to learn it, so I'm not going to worry about it. That doesn't work. That's not how God works. You know, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. And we see it's because it involves arrogance and boasting is sin, because especially, let's just say for Christians. Let's leave everybody else out for just a moment. Especially for Christians. That's who James is talking to, these Jewish Christians that are throughout the world. Not Jewish Christian, all Christians should know the will of God, without a doubt. And if we know it and don't do good with it, it's sin, it's wrong, and it's that simple. And I'm out of time. So as we think, basically finish it out there. So as we think about this, we make plans, here's the most ultimate. We need to be making plans for eternity. We need to make plans for eternity. And here's the great thing. God has said, I'm going to give you a plan for eternity. Think about that. He doesn't say you have to go out and try to figure it out on your own. I'm going to give you a plan for eternity. And it's in His book. It's in the Word of God. And if we live by that will and plan in that way, brethren, we all in the end will be with our Father in heaven and His Son. And all those others who did the same thing, that lived right by the will of God, will be there with them too. Any comments or questions before we close? Did someone have their hand up? Mom, go ahead.
I know when I was growing up, many of the prayers included, forgive us of our sins of commission and omission.
Right. Yep, that's exactly right. Brother Clipper said a moment ago about that omission and commission. And, you know, and that's just making sure, you know, you're with God. And you're right. I've heard some say, oh, the grace of God will save you through that. You don't have to worry about that. And I would say this. I would say, I understand where they're going to, but at the same time, if I do something wrong, or even if I did something wrong, you know, I don't want to be held accountable for that. I want to be able to be forgiven of that. And that's what we want to do. And that's where that accountability really comes down to. You're going to be held for it later down the road when you leave this world, or you can take care of it right there in that moment, because God gives us the ability to do that as Christians. And that's what we do. And that too in itself is planning, when you really think about it. That is planning ahead to be right with Christ. All right, we'll go ahead and close there. Thank you for your time. Nope, it's right here.